Hello everyone, welcome to our podcast Shingles with us singles. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Ganga, who is going to be talking about, yeah, you guessed it, shingle. Hello Dr. Ganga, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. Great. Now I know that shingles is usually described as an old people's disease, and that is the extent of my knowledge. Could you tell us more about this disease? Yes, of course. Shingles, or its scientific name, Zerbs hosta, is a neurotropic virus reactivated from a state of ganglionic latency, which would be established if the patient had contracted varicella zoster virus or VZV. Varicella zoster virus. So that's the virus that gives you chickenpox, right? Yes, that is correct. If you had chickenpox and you sense a familiar type of itchiness after a decade or so later, that's shingles. Now, although chickenpox and shingles share similar initial symptoms such as fever, fatigue, or itchy blisters, shingles is well recognized by the extremely painful fluid-filled rash that is localized to a particular area of your skin. Sometimes the pain can still occur after a month or so after the rash has been healed, and this condition is called PHN, post-therapeutic neuralgia. With chickenpox, you see blisters all throughout your skin. Oh, I see. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that shingles get reactivated a decade or so later after chickenpox. Could you explain this latency period a little bit more? Well, latency after lytic infection can be explained in two ways. One is that the host immune defenses overcame the lytic process, that is the infectious process, resulting in the silencing of that virus and the disease progress. Alternatively, the virus remained latent to avoid immune detection until an immunologically naive population arises that can be conquered, activating further spread of the virus. Since the virus remained dormant in the neurons of the peripheral nervous system, the VZV has the ability to reactivate to produce progeny virons. So that is the new virus particles that is reactivated from the parent virus in older or immunocompromised individuals. That is how the virus remain latent. The ability of latency depends on the maintenance of the virus genome in episomal configuration. So meaning that the virus develops circular DNA that remains separate from the host chromosome. So this way the varicella virus could persist without disturbing the host cellular DNA. When we look at the nature of herb zoster virus or shingles, what can we say about it? So from my research, I know that it is highly cell associated but has a low infectious rate because the particle to plague forming unit PFU ratio is 1:20,000. What does that mean? So particle to plague forming unit captures the number of physical virus particles that is required to produce one plague in cell cultures. In this case, a high ratio indicates that there is a large portion of the virus particle that is defective for each one infectious particle. I have my script here where it shows some of your research that you did at the University of Northampton, and I'm just going to read a bit about that. You found out that the latency would be established throughout the neural axis, which includes the dorsal root ganglia, the trigeminal ganglia, the autonomic ganglia. When it comes to the reactivation of the varicella zoster virus, you said that it may be caused by factors such as diminished cell-mediated immunity due to age, or immunosuppression due to pre-existing diseases or drug treatments, infection, X-ray, radiation or irradiation, trauma and malignancy. Is that right? Yeah, this is really interesting because some of these factors could also explain the reactivation of varicella in younger age groups. I know you mentioned that shingles is an old people's disease. Yes, I did. Wait, is that no longer the case? Well, for the most part, it is. Looking at the stats, we know that an incidence of 2 in 1,000 people among the children were reported with shingles, whereas 21.8 in 1,000 adults aged between 70 to 79 years were diagnosed with this disease. The peak incidence of her zoster lies in the age range of 60 to 69 years old, indicating that age is indeed a big risk factor for this disease. Now, this data that I just stated was shown in a 2014 paper, but if we look at some recent papers, a 2023 study showed that in recent years, that is between 2015 to 2021, the incident rate of shingles were the same in immunocompromised individuals aged 45 to 49 and 50 to 54 years of age. So usually when the age incidence of reactivated varicella virus revolves around individuals aged 50 and above, but this data is telling us that the age population might be actually decreasing for this disease. Another study in Yichang, China showed that the incidence of shingles significantly increased between the years of 10 and 27 years of age, plateaued between 30 and 50 years of age, and increased again after age 55. So, what are the reasons for the prevalence of shingles in younger age groups? UV radiation. Yeah, that's right. A unique study investigated the correlation of shingles incidence and UV radiation levels in Thailand. Basically, they found out that in higher latitudes like the northern region of Thailand, where the UV radiation was the strongest, there was a higher incidence of shingles. But there is some nuance to this. So, even though that is a positive correlation between the UV radiation and varicella zoster virus reactivation, the UV data is not able to demonstrate the seasonal outbreaks of shingles in that area. There was a high amount of interannual variation in its seasonal shape. A few reasons for this could be that the UV rays might not be a primary contributor to this disease, and data available for this kind of study may not be perfect. UV rays causing shingles. That is quite unique indeed. I know this sounds like a correlation is not causation type of situation, but at an immune system perspective, UV radiation could affect immunity in the time before the start of cellular reactivation. UV exposure impairs antigen presenting cell function, and it releases immune mediators such as prostaglandin E3, ILF4, TNF alpha, which leads to a shift from Th1 to Th2 response. So the upregulation of Treg or T-regulated cell and suppression of T cell mediated immunity is what causes the latent virus to reactivate. Now, if we were to have a more wider perspective on this, we know that UV radiation is not a sole factor for shingles. We have many other reasons such as stress, low immunity, fatigue, or unvaccinated children. Sorry, unvaccinated children? Could you expand on that? Yes, of course. Back in the 2000s in the UK, a study in 2002 investigated the assumption that active varicella zoster virus exposure is necessary to boost immunity among children. If the kids got it, the probability of the adults living with children getting it, that is the disease, is going to be high too. In this way, they theorized that the household exposure to varicella was highly protective against zoster. Many scientists back in the day actually discouraged the use of varicella vaccine and said, and I quote, "It may be wiser to delay a decision on the widespread use of varicella vaccine until a means of protecting adults from shingles has been found." End quote. Well, in contrast, in 1995 United States, varicella vaccination had already begun. So a computer model from this study predicted that universal vaccination in the USA could cause an additional 21 million cases of shingles and 5,000 deaths in the next 50 years. Well, did the prediction come to be true? Right. To give you an answer on that, another US study in 2011 compared the incidence of shingles in a population where varicella zoster virus was non-existent and combat that with the general population. They found out that there was a failure to demonstrate an increased risk of herb zoster in the population that was not exposed to varicella virus. Therefore, stated that adults that are not exposed to varicella early on will not be at risk of shingles. But what kind of population is safe from varicella exposure? Oh, they studied the members of the contemplative monastic orders, so monks. Oh, I see. Dr. Ganga, this was very insightful indeed. I would like to end this podcast by asking you some details of the pathophysiology, if you don't mind. In the immune system, the varicella replicates in the sensory ganglia where an immune response is induced, followed by a widespread necrosis of glia cells and neurons. Although the literature explaining the immune responses to varicella reactivation is quite limited, there is one study that identified the non-cytolytic CD8 plus T cells seems to be a prominent indicator of this disease. Now that is really interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Ganga. That's all right. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast.